snaps. So, speakers tonight for you will be Conservatives, then Labour, then Lib Dem, then Greens, and then back in the same order again. At the end, we will be taking questions and vote. But before that, we have some other matters to attend to. First up, announcements. There are a few. First would be that, let's see if I actually remember them. We, of course, have our LGBT Open competition coming up in a couple of, probably about a month and a half at this point. The main reason I bring that to your attention is that we will hopefully be hosting that, and if we do, we will require some very generous members among us here to provide us with crash. Our crash, what I mean, is just floor space for the division of institutions to sleep on. They don't need anything else, just a place to lie on the floor. They bring their sleeping bags and whatnot. So if anybody knows that they live in the area and it would be willing to get those, even if it's just for one or two people, that would be greatly appreciated. Other announcements, I don't think we have our internal meeting next Monday, is that correct, Mr. Dunn, where we are?
On the 12th.
On the 12th, indeed.
At 2 o'clock. We really good to see as many people possible there for your this is your chance. Help shape the same path, and if you haven't yet, we've got a spreadsheet up on the show room, so go and ask suggestions to that. Nothing's too wacky and you all very good spreadsheet, so go for it.
Thank you very much. Also, the only other announcement I can think of right now would be our cucumber bit, which is indeed happening. Unfortunately, because it's happening at the Dragon Slayers Big Convention Cucumber, you can only go and sit if you have a ticket to the event. But if you are already planning on going, then please come along and support the cause. And you can just buy a ticket anyway. We have speakers all filled up for that. But if you're any interest in being a reserve speaker, because someone dropped out, the motion is this house, please. The book is better than the film. Contact anyone in council and feel free to bring them down in the reserve. Otherwise, Mr. Billick, any other announcements you can think of? No? Mr. Gallagher?
You need to take it over speaking.
We're taking care of. Come on, we're going to get past. So yes, we're going to get past. The only thing that I particularly wanted to call attention to was that this debate is happening on the 6th, as you're aware, which is only 6 days into the new term of the new council. And it was arranged partly in the past 6 days, but also in a large part of the exams, and it was almost entirely arranged by our good internal conveners at Peter Dunn. And frankly, having seen private work went into getting this done, getting this through and whatnot, I truly believe he deserves a quick round of applause. That's enough. Right, private members' business. No, wrong. What's that, like 5 minutes? No, the next order of business is the minutes of the last meeting, which shall be read by very honourable Mr. Peter Beck. Gentlemen.
Apologies. The 11th of May saw the 23rd and final ordinary meeting of the 160th session of the Lister Scientific Society at Queen's University, Belfast. There were 44 members present, and I'm told it was not a dry eye in the house. Firstly, because it was the last meeting of the session. Secondly, because we were debating cultural appropriation. And thirdly, because I was not in attendance. Private members' business was raised by Mr. Matthew Sullivan, who asked what Supreme Leader May was so afraid of so as to avoid debates. After a year in society, he can sympathise with the position. After being told to stand up, Mr. Dunn replied that all Prime Minister had to do was sit still for a few weeks to win the election. Mr. Dunn said it was because she was not very good at answering questions. Our Treasurer, Mr. McDonald, delivered a short press release from Downing Street, so it's quite rightly fine about the report. Our new President, Mr. Blackburn, regaled the House with the tale of his and President Murphy's disastrous old election campaigns and how voting for Kafuli became a running joke, before presenting our outgoing President with a copy of H.P. Lovecraft's Necronomicon, again not President Cried, signed by members of the Society. President's questions saw Mr. Adair have the honour of being the final member to ask President Murphy what he had for breakfast. He had a quote, really awful tuna and sweet corn sandwich. In answer to Mr. Donnelly's question, President Murphy said that the best part of being president of this great society was giving his boat high collection the attention it deserves. And in answer to Secretary Whitehurst's question, said that his favourite debate was either the United Ireland debate or this House would make a sex tape. The motion for the night was announced as this House believes cultural appropriation is cultural appreciation, and there was much wailing and gnashing of teeth. Opening for the proposition was Miss Lily Vedder, who clarified cultural appropriation is not harmful, whereas cultural misappropriation is a harmful violation of collective intellectual property rights, done with malice. Miss Vedder also excited many in the audience by mentioning Justin Bieber, using his dreadlocks as an example of how many supposed examples of appropriation are actually present in many cultures around the world, and that one group does not own a hairstyle, and that everyone should have the right to express themselves as they see fit. First up for the opposition was Mr. Jeremy Muller, who began by confirming that he is indeed white and male, but he pointed out that he hardly ever get feminism. He told us that a concept so ludicrous as to require permission to cook foreign foods, of which proponents attack professors defending free speech has no merit whatsoever. Mr. Muller separated it from exchange, as there is no permission from the other side, and that misrepresenting something without contact is not appreciated as it ignores context and history. He also claimed that the right and justice in our society, we need to see it and address it, rather than making caricatures of it. Mr. Muller had said that it can take away people's cultures, allowing them to because of what's added to them, and can allow people to excuse racism. Mr. Liam Mackle, in his first speech to the Society, continued the case for the proposition and began by rebutting Mr. Muller's point about gaining permission from other countries, and even brought his economics degree knowledge of transaction costs into play. As many of you know, I'm a big fan of mentioning what degree I studied, so I would love to see some of this. He used this story of his day to show how the everyday use of fruits of other cultures was in fact appreciation. Mr. Mackle also dropped some psychology in the matter by showing how negative events are remembered more than positives, and how this explains concerns about cultural appropriation. Mr. Dobbin, in his 5,000th speech for the Society, made his first point using slang, the words of which I cannot recount because I haven't a clue what they are or mean. He then said that this showed that it was an example of a caricature of other cultures and was not appreciative. Mr. Dobbin then said that we need to give more respect for where parts of other cultures come from, where they are going and what certain things signify, to make sure we do not harmfully appropriate them. He then brought us extensive culinary knowledge to the fore by telling us all that we do not grow curry, and sought to draw a line between something as innocuous as eating food and something as meaningful as a Native American headdress. Mr. Ken Gallagher proved for the proposition. He began by telling us how cultures do not speak unanimously, and how culture cannot even be defined, giving the example of how it is impossible to speak about African culture as a monolith. He then showed how jazz has origins in 3 continents, and so no one can claim exclusive ownership, before lambasting Iggy Azalea, not for appropriation, but because her rap music is, quote, rubbish. Mr. Gallagher then pointed out that we should not assume that any given member of culture is an expert in it. For example, many of us do not even know our national anthems. Are we kind of say God save the Queen?
I've heard not for back.
That's right. He finished by saying, it is through appreciation that we allow culture to develop. Closing with the opposition and therefore the debate was Mr. Chris Spratt. He pointed out that his argument was quite similar in premise to Miss Vedder's. He then told us how the debate is predicated on 2 things, appropriation and appreciation, and how in his opinion these are mutually exclusive. He also drew a distinction between appreciating the item and appreciating the culture itself, and that we should not paint all acts with a broad brush. Thoughtful questions were raised by Mr. Conor McNamara, Joe Bishop, Robert Clark, Jimmy Carroll, Colin Neal, Calvin Black, and Ryan Neal. The vote on prior opinion read 5 ayes, 5 nays, and 28 abstentions, so much for a hyper-polarised modern society. And the final vote on speaker ability read 12 ayes, 12 nays, and 14 abstentions. We do love a good tight vote here at the River. May I take the minutes as read?
Right, so the next order of business is private members' business. During this time, you can ask questions to the House if you have a limited bit. Just point out if you don't ask any questions, that's coming up next. But you can ask a question about anything else. Do we have any private members' business? Anyone want to talk about something that's in the news recently? Any of the ridiculous tweets that Donald Trump has made? Come on. Mr. McDonald!
I would like people to speculate what they thought Donald Trump was actually trying to say when he said coffee.
An interesting question. Do anyone would like to input the matter, Miss Ireland?
I'd like to say and suggest that he wasn't actually trying to say anything at all. His press team called him tweeting by himself.
I do like that interpretation. Anybody else have any suggestions of what could have really been going through his mind at that time? Mr. Sullivan?
Well, it looks like he was trying to write coverage, he made a typo, and then his press team, for some unknown reason, decided to say only a select few people know what the president meant by this. Why would they do that?
Excellent question, Sullivan. Anyone else that don't have any keen insights on how to? No. Do you want to try and go for one more bit of private members' business? Come on, Mr. Murphy.
Mr. President, sir, I'm sure the House would like to join me in offering our congratulations to Mr. George and Amal winning on the birth of their twins. It's fine.
Yes, I believe the way that works is that as a motion in the House. Can I get a seconder? Okay then, go ahead. All those in favour of congratulating George and Amal on the birth of their twins, everybody say aye in favour. Aye. Sure, everybody say nay if you're against. Nay. Everybody say meh if you know where the thing one way or the other. I believe the ayes have it, Mr. Secretary. You're starting your phone, your screen. Are there any other bits of private members' business?
I think on a similar vein, we should maybe pay our condolences to Paddy Johnson, the people in Manchester and the people in London.
Here. Can I get a seconder? All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. All those abstaining say nay. Okay, motion carried. This House therefore extends its condolences to the family of Patrick Johnson, to the victims of the Manchester bombings, and to the victims of the London attacks. I believe that will close out private members' business, unless anybody else would jump in. No, okay then, we move on to President's questions. Any question for me personally, or for me about civil society, or Mr. Solomon, I should give you the honour of asking what I think is...
Mr. President, much like the predecessor before you, you're a beacon to the society. You show us an example by which we wish to live. To that end, would you tell us what you had for breakfast this morning?
See, Mr. Sullivan, there are quite a few people here who do not regularly attend our debates and all have no idea what that means. The joke of being carried out. But anyway, I shall tell you that for breakfast this morning, I had, as I always have, a bowl of shreddies, not shreddies, with soy milk, not vegan, not vegetarian, just drink soy milk apparently, a glass of cranberry juice, 2 bagels with butter, and a cup of tea. This morning it was Clipper green tea and milk. Hey, who did that? Who got my green tea? I'm looking at you, I'm not impressed. Anyway, any other bits of further questions? Mr. Dolan? On your feet, Mr. Dolan!
Is the room comfortable?
It is, it's very freeing, it's very airy, it's very good. I'm never encouraged if it's sitting properly, but yes, it is fine. Makes me feel like a wizard. That was a very good spin out of work professionally. Any other bits of President's questions? Anyone going once, going twice? Closed! Okay. That just leaves the main preamble. So, seeing as how they're put on the case now, quickly explain how I did work. Each person here will give a 7-minute speech. The first and last minute of that speech are protected, which means that no one can make a point of information. When the first minute is passed and when we're in the last minute, I will bang the gavel down there. To give a point of information, you simply stand and say, on that point, sir or madam, please do say on that point, because otherwise they'll be staring at your speech and not notice you. I would also appreciate it if you could give a name, preferably your name for the minutes. But if you're not comfortable doing that, you can make up a name. You can give your first name, last name, or, Kurt Wagner or something.
Everyone's going to say that.
Anyone who says that will be removed, but the biggest person in this room is looking like...
You're going to finish.
Just kidding. So yes, the running order will be Conservatives, Labour, as I said before, Lib Dems, Green, and back to and at the end we shall take a vote on Speaker ability. That's the binding vote. And since there are quite a few non-members here, can I quickly suggest that we pass a motion allowing non-members to vote on that? Seconded. Vote in favour? Aye, say aye. All against, say nay. Okay. Abstentions? Okay, so that's carried. Normally for that vote only members would be allowed to vote, but anyway. But before that we would also have another vote, which would be prior opinion. However, it's never made any sense to me that we have the vote of prior opinion at the end. So we shall take that vote now, if everybody's okay with that. So, let me just say, the Constitution is a piece of paper. I am free. All those who, right now, if the election would be taking place right now, you would vote in favour of Conservatives. Please raise your hand and say strong and still.
long as they vote.
Five, Mr. Secretary?
Make it 15.
Five. All those who would vote in favour of the Labour Party say many, not few. I have 20, Mr. Secretary. Raise your hand, there's time, whatever.
Chaos.
We get that habit.
I can find it out.
Yeah, okay. All those who would vote in favour of the Little Downs, raise your hand and say, we miss Clyde. Good, I have one, Mr. Secretary. And all those who would vote in favour of the Green Party, please raise your hand and say, just have a good evening. That's disappointing. Mr. Stellan Gallagher is very disappointed. And finally, all those who would spoil their ballot or simply not turn out, set light, set pride, say nah, and raise your hands. Good, we have 3, Mr. Secretary. Okay. So I believe Labour is winning, points by Andrew Mather on the power opinion. So, leave, unless Mr. Secretary you can think of anything else that needs to be addressed. No. I therefore do invite the first speaker for the Conservative Party, Mr. John MacDonald. Mr. MacDonald, will you hand me your speech?
Yeah.
Good, so give me a nod when you start your timer.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Ladies and gentlemen, what this country needs is strong and stable leadership. As we go through the Brexit negotiations and beyond, Brussels will attempt to pit this country against each other. What we need to be is one united nation standing behind one party to get the best possible Brexit deal. A Brexit deal after which our financial obligations to the EU will end except in certain sectors. A coalition of chaos led by Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party will not deliver on that. They've got two parties that want to reverse the decision back in June 2016. Whether you voted to remain or to leave, we must all understand the need for a good Brexit. What we need is strong and stable leadership. And a strong and stable leadership requires a strong and stable team. We have the very best in the country fighting for our place in the world. We have the very best forging new diplomatic ties. Boris Johnson. We have the very best forging big trade deals and growing British businesses with the rest of the world. We have Fox. And we have the very best negotiating our exit from the European Union, David Davis. Not only do you get Theresa May as Prime Minister, but you get her great team. What is the alternative to Theresa May's strong and stable leadership? You get Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party in a coalition of chaos backed up by Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish National Party who seek to break up our nation. Who have said that they would do a deal with Labour. You get Tim Farron and the Liberal Democrats who want to bring us back to a second EU referendum and reverse the will of the British people.
Hold on, boy.
No, thank you. And the Green Party who lack all economic competence. You've probably seen them in the debates. You've probably already seen them in the Farron debates. You've seen them squabble amongst each other. Imagine that in a cabinet meeting, or imagine that in the world fighting for our negotiations, so thank you. Imagine that going into the negotiations, it would embarrass our country. What is the alternative to Theresa May's strong and stable team? You get Diane Abbott, someone who wants to wipe criminal DNA databases, who can't count, and will threaten our national security. You have John MacDonald, a self-proclaimed Marxist, who wants to drive away British business, who wants to see the end of MI5, and who wants our police officers to be disarmed despite the troubling times we face. And of course you get Emily Thornberry, who calls every question she's asked sexist. We have Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister, who doesn't support armed nuclear deterrence, who fought for the closure of NATO in the past, someone who doesn't support the shoot-to-kill policy in terrorist situations, and who boasted in 2011 for saying that he voted against 30 years anti-terror legislation.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Theresa May.
On your feet.
There's a reason they not vote against that exact same day.
No. He voted against 30 years of legislation. She voted against one. In 2005, I believe it was. Jeremy Corbyn and his team are threats to our national security by refusing to say whether to repress the nuclear deterrent button if someone were to strike against us. Our enemies would know that we have deterrent on paper, but not in reality. Jeremy Corbyn cannot guarantee that Trident will be renewed after Emily Thornberry said that a strategic defence review could in fact mean that Trident does not get renewed. He would drive up unemployment, drive away small business, and would force up our taxes. And someone who would drive up our taxes and borrow Britain into the ground. He has a magic money trade. No, thank you. He is a magic. Sorry, actually, go ahead. Go ahead.
So, a fully costed manifesto states clearly how the whole surplus will be achieved by, what is it, 2022, unlike literally no costings whatsoever, and supposedly maybe sometime in the middle of the decade. So how exactly does that work?
Well, as the IFS has said, that some of his costings have been quite controversial. His corporation tax is said to be 20 billion pounds, is it? It's not, sorry, 40 is going to bring in 20 billion pounds. Apparently I read that somewhere. His things are fully costed, but he hasn't done a strict, he has used online sources, but he hasn't done a direct thing of his own. He hasn't done a direct costing of his own. And you might very well see the other manifesto on his tax proposals that it won't negatively affect the poor, only 5%. But firstly, his garden tax will hit 10 million people, and corporation tax will hurt everybody. So who pays corporation tax? Corporation tax, you might say the tax on profits is a tax on businesses. Well, it's not. It's a tax on workers. It's a tax on consumers. It's a VAT tax, but it's just disguised as corporation tax, and it's a tax on owners. But in our manifesto, we have set out long-term, clear proposals that deal with the issues that affect ordinary working people. And we also set to bring back power from Brussels and forge great new trade deals. We're going to win on trade, we're going to win on jobs, we're going to win on Brexit. We are committed to ensuring a long-term, stable funding mechanism for social care and incorporating mental health into the NHS so as on par with physical health. We're going to bring back the lovely institution of grammar schools that we have here in Northern Ireland, and we're going to do away with the postcode lottery system of schools that we have. We are committed to funding the NHS. We are committed to funding the NHS by an extra £8 billion, and yet most importantly, we acknowledge that in Brexit, there can be a deal that is worse than no deal. If you set out in your negotiations that you will remain in the EU, if you get a bad deal, the EU will make sure that you get a bad deal.
Hold on.
So, go ahead.
What's an example of a deal which would be worse than no deal?
A deal that will be against what we set out in the referendum to end the free movement of people, etc. That is what Jeremy Corbyn wants to overthrow the will of the British people. Maybe not himself, but this coalition of chaos, but right there, they all want to throw, all these backbench MPs want to overthrow the will of the British people. The SNP want to remain in the single market and break up our country. The Liberal Democrats and the Greens want to remain in the EU and have a second referendum. They disrespect the will of the British people as per June the 8th. We need to give our police greater power to deal with the threats that face the modern world, and we need our armed forces that can deal with the threats that face Britain. We need a Prime Minister who will stand up for our armed forces, where Corbyn has in fact been videoed saying, fight all the cuts, except in the armed forces, where he wants to see a few more cuts and no more nuclear videos saying that. And only just to finally close out, there's only one party in this election that can stand up for Britain in trade deals and globally, one party that can get the best possible Brexit deal, and one party that can keep our nation safe. That's why I urge you tonight to vote for the Conservative Party tonight and on June the 8th. Thank you very much.
Just before I welcome the next speaker, I'd like to point out that just one or two things I forgot to mention. Whenever you offer quick information, even if the person accepts it and doesn't answer your question, there's no back and forth, so don't try and keep that going. And also, Mr. Sullivan, and Mo, we know who you are, but lead by example and silly names and whatnot. If you know the rules, lead by example. So I welcome the next speaker just the next speaker, the opening for the Labour Party, Mr. Rachel Lara.
So, to paraphrase the illustrious Mr. Feedback, you can pick me around and call me Corbyn. For the Labour Party. And I would like to start with, as we are all to do in this society, with a little bit of rebuttal because, John, I'm sorry, but I've written down untrue in my notes so many times when we started that. So the reversal on the EU vote that you pointed out, that's just not true. The Labour Party never said that they want to completely reverse the vote. They've never said that they want to completely reverse the vote, but we will if it is best for the country to leave the European Union, which we argue that it is not. We will not leave the EU unless we have the deal that is best for the country, and by that we mean the deal that is best for the people in this country. There's been a definite focus from the Tories so far on a market, which is unsurprising. But Labour it's a much more people-focused party, but focused through the economy. So I'm going to quote here from the manifesto. We will scrap the Conservative Brexit white paper and replace it with fresh negotiating priorities that have a strong emphasis on retaining the benefits of the single market, which I know you're going to argue there are none, but there are, and the customs union, which are essential for maintaining industries, jobs and businesses in Britain. Labour will always put jobs and the economy first, but not at the expense of its people. So the comments made about employment are untrue. Labour, one of Labour's main focuses is employment, but not in the way in taxes that I think you were talking about. So they pointed out in their manifesto that graduates often leave university with £44,000 of debt, and they're going to change that by scrapping tuition fees, which I know is a controversial point to start off on. The taxes would be going to the highest earner, those earning over £80,000, and will be going back to graduates, those with disabilities, those in the smallest minorities who are receiving the highest cuts. A Labour government will seek to restore balance in our society as much as possible. You know, it's not something that can be done instantly. Yes, taxes would be going from the highest earners, and money would be going back to those with disabilities. 4.2 million people in Britain live with disabilities and are really hurt the hardest by this because they're simply not considered. One thing I discovered when reading through the manifesto was that British Sign Language is not currently officially recognised as a language, and considering the sheer number of people that there are who use British Sign Language every single day, I argue that a Labour government that is supporting people with disabilities in the NHS, in society, is far and wide the more sensible choice on doing it, more so than any other party sitting at this table, I would argue. There's a focus on the point of minorities, women and LGBT groups. They're always going to come up, so I'm going to bring them up now. Labour are looking to reform and audit pay gaps for women, people with disabilities, people from black and minority groups, as well as refugees. Because as we saw in the rise in the aftermath of Brexit, which I will again argue was not a majority vote, 52% of the population is only a technical majority. That does not speak for the entirety of the UK, especially when every single constituency in Scotland had a majority stay vote. That doesn't represent the entire country. That represents a very specific group, and Labour won't stand for it. So there'll be an audit for gender and equal pay acts across minorities, an improvement on maternity leave, an improvement on the inclusion of health and sex education, which will all link in with a more publicised, not privatised NHS. Labour, to follow on from the strong and stable, by the way, I took a drink every time. Don't say that. Really bad idea. So, yes, a Labour government focuses on everyone. And I think it's particularly important when I'm speaking to a room full of young people to note that the typical Labour voter is our age and is from our class bracket. So people voting for the Labour Party, we're all voting for ourselves. If we vote for Labour government, we get the best deal out of this. It's not baby boomers anymore. If you want to change things, you need to vote for Labour government, because otherwise they're just going to stay exactly the way we are, exactly the way that they are. And we can't sit and complain about things when there's a clearly viable option available. 49% of voters, according to a YouGov poll, agree agreed with Labour's policies to abolish tuition fees, to go back to the point that I said earlier.
On that point,
Yes?
not even a technical majority.
Pardon?
Not even a technical majority.
Not even a technical majority, but I think enough to start something, if that makes any sense. That's not a very good point. But I think it's enough. If 52% is enough to withdraw from the EU, I think 49% is enough in an opinion poll to suggest that there's something that can be done here. There's a 58% support in the increase in income tax for earners over 80,000 pounds that I mentioned earlier, as well as a 65% support to cap rent fees to stay in line with inflation. So again, I think this backs up my point that the Labour government supports everyone and is more than anything up with you, which I think is a much better slogan than strong statement, because that just doesn't mean anything. And it's a focus on everyone. And there are so many points from reading the manifesto earlier this afternoon that I haven't been able to touch on. But I think I've spoken on the main points that I wanted to. Mo, who's going to speak later, will speak on, as far as I'm aware, more economic points and defence, as far as I know, which I haven't touched on, so I do apologise for that. But I cannot stress enough that a vote for a Labour government is a vote for yourselves, and it's a vote for everyone in this room, and it's a vote to make sure that those who have been previously ignored and excluded, quite often deliberately, by traditionally conservative governments, that they get their vote and that they get their chance to stand up. And we have an opportunity to completely change how this country is run, and I think we should all take it. Vote Labour.
That's good. Well, that's not also, don't forget to also discuss right now, I'd like to welcome the next speaker, the first speaker for the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Jason Bunting. You're sitting here wrong way around. I'd like to welcome the first speaker for the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Jack Armstrong. You time yourself, good sir. Or would you like me to just do it
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President, and apologies for the inconvenience of the display seats. So yes, I am representing the Liberal Democrats, and we would appreciate your vote very much on the 8th of June. And we all know what this election is primarily about, it is the B word, Brexit. So, certainly yes, there was a referendum held on the 23rd of June, and the strong, stable Conservative government who supported it has now plunged us into economic chaos through that. Yes, we accept and acknowledge that the referendum was now a majority, and the people have said on the 23rd of June that they would wish to leave the European Union. But there are many diverse reasons why. Perhaps it was immigration, perhaps it was various thoughts of the EU itself, or perhaps they were just fed up with the status quo. So the Liberal Democrats are unashamedly pro-Europe. We always have been and always will be. We believe that certainly no deal would be worse than any deal. And the best deal is actually what we currently have in the European Union. So what is our plan? Our plan is simply a second referendum. We shall have the negotiations. If it is us in government, then we will provide them, or if it is the Conservatives or Labour or whoever else, they will go through the Article 50 negotiations. Or Brits, of course. But not even that's not. And yes, so we have a few conditions that we'd like to see. First of all, single membership in the single market. This is essential for our jobs, or thousands of jobs that rely on it, certainly in the city of London. We pull out of the single market, those financial services will evacuate, we'll go to Dublin or Paris or Frankfurt or other places. Also the customs union, which is essential. For example, for Northern Ireland, we have border with the rest of the island, which would be devastated by any sort of border, basically. And freedom of movement is absolutely essential. It's one of the core fundamental freedoms. We want people to be able to, first of all, obviously, citizens come here and provide jobs, but we'd like to see the 2 million UK citizens that are currently living in the EU to maintain that right as well. And for our students, I'm sure many students here would like to move abroad, certainly I would always consider it. and we'd like to keep the opportunity to do with the 27 other countries. So, with that in mind, at the end of the 2 years, we would like to see a referendum on said deal. The options would be simply accept the terms of the negotiations, the terms of the deal, and leave on the basis or remain in the EU. Now, if it's a great deal, as I said, if it involves single market, customs union, etc., then we will accept it. But at the moment, if it is a reckless hard Brexit provided by the strongest Labour government of Theresa May, or indeed of Mr Corbyn, then we would opt for it to support the Remain vote in that referendum. So that is our number one priority in Brexit, but a number of other issues. Yep.
So on your feet, Mr. Devlin?
So you talked about, and both Labour have as well, about not accepting tactical majorities and about what you think the votes mean. So how do you believe that using further popular democracy for constitutional decisions is going to provide any more stability than what was already been?
Well, certainly we didn't want the referendum in the first place for Europe. We didn't want any instability. With regards to that, but the fact is it has been held, and as I said, it is people showed on that day that they wish to leave. That was the beginning of the Brexit process. So we believe that the Brexit process should also end with a referendum, because it started with the people giving their say at the start, to give it at the end as well. In a number of other issues, I'd like to touch on the issue of rights, because that is one thing that certainly is going to come into play with the Conservative government targeting personal freedoms if they were returned. So the one thing that the Liberal Democrats will do is stand up for the Human Rights Act and the European Convention on Human Rights, which Theresa May has spoken of. I'm glad that it was included in the Conservative manifesto that they won't target it in this Parliament, but Theresa May's done some of the U-turns from the road. Also, we will stand up for refugees. We want to see as many as possible from Syria being provided in the UK. We would bring back the Dove scheme for free housing unaccompanied refugee children in Europe, which was disgracefully removed by the Conservatives with help from the various unionist parties in Northern Ireland. In terms of constitutional matters, Brexit is, as mentioned there, a huge constitutional shift, and there will be, if it goes through, there will be many powers come back to Westminster and the various devolved governments. So we'd like to see a few significant changes there. For example, we'd like to see votes for 16-year-olds, as in Scotland. We saw the Scottish referendum that it's really helped younger people get much more involved in politics. We'd like to see proportional representation instead of first past the post, so that it doesn't become, so that people, from ourselves as the Greens or other parties actually listen to, and it doesn't become a case where there's well over 2/3 of seats are safe ones. And we support devolution. It's been a success in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland at the moment, but we think certainly the adoption of the London Mayor has been great, and as well as other places like Manchester. So we would see where it was in England there is a demand, and we'd like to give as much power as possible to people on the ground. Certainly people in the north of England and elsewhere probably feel quite far from the Westminster bubble. So with the short time left, I'll move on to a few other policies. So we have obviously a crisis in the NHS at the moment. It's certainly struggling, as well as a housing crisis. So the Liberal Democrats would put forward a 1p rise in income tax in order to help or further provide for the NHS, give it the boost it needs in terms of providing much better services. It would help provide education, helping school budgets, and on that point we would oppose said selected schools that the Conservatives have mentioned. In addition, in terms of the environment, we feel it's very important to tackle air pollution, which has killed about 40,000 people a year in the UK. And again, back to Brexit, in terms of agriculture, we recognise the importance of the common agricultural policy for British farming. So in any Brexit deal, we would ensure that it remains as close as possible to that. And yeah, that's about it. So please vote Liberal Democrats. We've proven to be the most strong and stable in terms of our policy. We haven't moved to the far left or the far right, and we need to oppose this rise of populism we see with Brexit and President Trump and other things. So yeah, vote Liberal Democrats. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome the first speaker of the Greens, Mr. Peter Dunn. Ready?
President, esteemed opposition and lovely Africans, it's my pleasure to speak to represent the Green Party this evening. So, why should you care about the Greens or even listen to the Greens in this election? Why wouldn't you just vote Labour for the Progressive vote? And the answer lies in this. We, unlike the major parties, aren't afraid. The major parties will beckon to the demands of popular pressure and that of their own MPs. The Greens offer the only real progressive vote, with no holds barred, standing up passionately for human rights, environmental issues, and a fair and just society. If you take this Green vote, there are a set of real guarantees that you can expect if you vote Green in this election. We will campaign for your right to vote on the final terms of the Brexit deal, including an option to stay in the EU. We will push for genuinely affordable warm homes for everyone in the public health system, free for all, but also one that works for all. We will fight for equality and for a society where nobody is left behind. We will act strongly on climate change and to protect the natural world we live. We will stand up for what matters, and this is the Green Guarantee. This election is being treated by the Conservative Party as the Brexit election. And this is mainly because Theresa May doesn't have anything more interesting to say, and she's just shying away from their insubstantial and unfair policies coming to them. As I'm sure you'll hope you've been informed tonight, the Tories are trying to push through a hard Brexit. A Brexit which will affect the lives of everybody in this room. A Brexit that will damage our trade and will damage our freedom of movement. The impacts of Brexit, although visible across the country, are particular pertinent to here in this wee country of Northern Ireland, with the threat of the establishment of the border, which has already been mentioned, which would be certainly a backward step in the hard-fought peace process. Companies are already moving to the Republic to be a part of the single market. But we want to make clear we want to put democracy at the heart of this complicated Brexit process. And I believe this referendum was the start of the process, not the end. Northern Ireland and Scotland both voted to stay in the EU. And we want to recognise that and push for this to be recognised in the government. Bearing all this in mind, a vote was taken, and we respect that vote. But we are one of the few parties prepared to respond to a change felt within the population. I realise a decision of this magnitude and such implication deserves greater influence from the people than particularly Theresa May is prepared to give. If you give Theresa May a vote, you'll give her the mandate to give the hard Brexit that she wants. She'll be able to push anything through. And that's why you need to vote progressive in this election. This level of democratisation lies at the core of Green values. We make no qualms. We believe that environment should be at the heart of our policies, because a prosperous, bright and fair future for us all will undoubtedly be green. We intend to introduce the Environmental Protection Act, which will guarantee strong protection for our natural environment, our oceans, especially Greenland and national parks. The UK, as briefly mentioned by the Liberal Democrat campaign, is facing a public health emergency, though I don't think he stressed the importance of it. Over 40,000 early deaths are attributable, including heart disease and strokes, to air pollution every year. And to be honest, the government at the moment doesn't really seem to care. We are the only party who properly put pressure to combat this. And we've got a couple of policies of which to do so. Firstly, we want to remove diesel cars from our roads, promote cycling and walking through an extensive £2 billion scheme. And I'm sure some of you are thinking, what use will that do? But after looking through the Green Party policy, their targets to get into schools and to really create a culture where we're not using non-renewable sources is vitally important for creating a green future. We also want to keep fossil fuels where they belong, in the ground, and invest heavily in renewable sources such as wind farms.
On that point,
Yeah.
if we're so committed to getting rid of fossil fuel power stations, why are we so against nuclear power?
Because we believe sustainable, renewable power is not going to be nuclear. And if the future is going to be bright for this country, we don't believe the potential ramifications of nuclear power is worth it, and we believe there are better and more sustainable resources. The question you will all be asking, and there's already been confident of course, is how the heck are the Green Party going to pay for anything that I suggest? Our bright, sustainable vision will be paid for a fair tax. It will be progressive, shifting tax from individuals to big corporations, taxing not bads, not goods, and unearned income at the same rate as earned income, taxing speculation on Wall Street, and cutting corporation tax giveaways. A strong pledge by the Tory government is to cut freedom of movement, but the Green Party, in response, strongly argues for a just and fair immigration system. Just and fair means accepting more than 3,000 refugees. There is no excuse. It is pitiful that the fifth richest country in the world cannot offer appropriate asylum to those in desperate need, particularly when there are 5 million Syrians seeking refugee status alone. And that isn't to count the amount of refugees across the world as well. So to quickly wrap up, we've also got a big emphasis on building homes, and this isn't something that we believe has been focused enough, especially with shocking rise of food banks and homelessness on the street. And many of you may be thinking now, this is all very well and good, but what would another voice another voice which is green in Parliament actually do for you? If you believe in the system of democracy, where every MP, not just the biggest party, has his or her part to play in transforming government and calling our leaders to account, you should vote for a real progressive vote and a prosperous and fair Britain for all. Thank you.
I also just like to point out that I did everything in the bathroom. Yeah, sure, I can show you. I know I was at the beginning of Brian. First speaker for the second one. The second speaker for the Conservatives, Mr. Hugh Nolan.
I just realised it's out of charge.
That's fine, so.
The only time I need is the time for strong and stable living.
1, 2, 3, go.
So, everyone, I stand before you today as a student. I stand before you as someone who's on a zero-hour contract, and I stand before you as someone who loves the Conservative Party. Now, there's a lot of things to go through. First, I think what we have to do is try and toss out the fodder of this election, namely this half of the table. So, let's talk about the Lib Dems and the Greens. Firstly, we have the Lib Dems. Their only ploy in this election has been to pick up the jaded remains of those dissatisfied with the Brexit vote. Doing so by choosing to repeat a process that they say they oppose, but yet want to try and do again. It makes no sense, and it shows that they have no proper vision for this election. They're not going to win anyway. On to the Greens again. Matthew Sullivan already raised an excellent point that they do not support nuclear power, despite supposedly wanting to inspire renewable sources of energy. Alright, this shows that the Greens try and pursue environmentalism and this kind of social justice, as it were, at the expense of the economy. With the amount of investment that non-renewable sources, these sectors have in our economy, their proposals are too high risk, I say, for a government to try and pursue. Alright? No. So, Peter Dunn said they have no holds barred, and I agree. In government, they would take the reins of the country straight into a brick wall. So, secondly, I feel that we need to try and tackle taxes and the economy, which, despite being a very boring subject, seems to be the crux of what elections are about, naturally. So, there's a tendency whenever taxes or the economy come up that the Conservatives end up looking like the baddies. So, I'd like to outline here why that is not the case. So, we need to think about what the Conservatives are standing on this election for. And it's been rammed out too many times, so I'm not going to use that god-awful slogan that Theresa May has gone with. The fact is, what the Conservative Party is trying to do is re-secure the mandate that it already did in 2015. And we know what this is. It's moving forward with a sustainable economy, and a strong and stable one. So, and that's what needs to be done here. And we do this because we're moving towards a very high-risk stage. A question has very often been posed to her about why Theresa May decided to call this election in the first place. It's been such a big thing, I'm surprised it's never been mentioned. And Theresa May is terrible at interviews, so she's never articulated this properly. But there is a reason. And the point is that due to the Brexit vote, the future of the UK remains in flux. And due to this, that is why we need another election. It's one to show again that the British people... Yes.
Surely she's actually just using it because it's, the fixed term parliament means that it will be 5 years after this vote before we see the Tories see any sort of electoral accountability. So there'll be a 3-year gap between the end negotiation result and then being trounced to the ballot box for whatever shoddy negotiation that is. Yeah,
I actually thought she wanted to do it because she thought she could beat Labour really easily. But the point being that what the Conservatives are trying to do is re-secure that same mandate that they scored in 2015. Move forward with a sustainable future, and if you let the economy grow, not in the way that Labour would suggest, or the Greens would suggest, with radical social reform. I don't know what the Lib Dems have suggested, but that is the way that the country needs to move forward in future. Alright? For example, you say that the Labour manifesto's policies are fully costed. This once again comes into the fact that Britain's future is in flux. We don't know what a post-Brexit UK is going to look at this point. We've said we are pushing for a hard Brexit deal, and this could put into question some of these Labour policies. That's why we want to remain steadfast and careful and see what the best way to proceed is, because we again don't know what kind of deal we're going to receive before moving into these negotiations. So, we then need to move on to that old chestnut, the big issue of this election, which is Brexit. That dastardly referendum that we had to have for some reason. So, I personally think popular democracy is a terrible idea, but there you go. So, anyway. The point then comes into question about the leadership. Now, this is what I want to bring out that little phrase again, strong and stable leadership. I've already outlined in this speech that it's a terrible phrase, but since Theresa May once again never has, I want to try and articulate what she means by that. Now, we have already revealed that the policies of both the Lib Dems and the Greens provide no kind of sustainable future, so we need to look at the only legitimate threat sitting at this table, which is the Labour Party, as we saw in the prior opinion vote. So, we need to think about the state of the Labour Party internally and where it's going. Only a year ago, half of that party was turned against Corbyn. He had no support. He had to have a leadership election very shortly after he first became leader. Is that the sort of person that we trust? Yes?
He also won that leadership election by a landslide.
Not Labour MPs. The membership may have that support for Jeremy Corbyn, but it's clear that the party within Westminster doesn't. If he says one more thing that the party disagree with, brings out one more policy or says something that they don't like, then they can turn against him again in the Brexit negotiation process. And it's important in Brussels that a leader appears to have their party behind them. There was much fractures within the Conservative Party before the Brexit referendum, but once it was passed, the party was able to fall behind Theresa May and follow their vision for what it was. Up until this election was called, unity behind Jeremy Corbyn seemed impossible. And I doubt whether or not moving forward it's possible again in Westminster. And we cannot risk that. Instead, I'm going to ram it out again. Theresa May and the Conservative Party provide the sort of leadership that we need to get a proper deal in Brussels for a Brexit deal. So, what have we outlined here today? We've outlined that the Conservative Party's policies are a cautious approach that is best suited for the changing constitutional status of the UK. We've proven that the Lib Dems and Greens provide no proper future for Britain, and their policies are half-hearted and don't go anywhere. We've proven that the Labour Party's leadership is not suited, and the Conservative Party provides the best future for the UK. Thank you.
Being able to say, sit down, Mr. Dobbin! But in any event, I would welcome the second speaker for the Labour Party, Mr. Mo Musa. Having your preference, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, ready to sing? 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everyone. It's nice to be back. So, my position as second prop is to come back with the talk to two gentlemen there. I've got notes here, but they've essentially said nothing, you might have noticed. Throughout both of their speeches, they repeated platitudes, they never mentioned a single policy. They're talking about strong and stable and about a long-term economic plan, yet Mr. Dobbin, who specifically outlined that he was going to talk about the economics, about why we need the Conservatives to push us through such an uncertain environment, didn't mention one policy. And that's not his fault, it really isn't. In fact, if you go onto the Tory website and you look at their manifesto, if you can point me to one policy which outlines anything in terms of a long-term economic plan, anything in terms of expanding the human capital and the capital growth across the country, then absolutely well done to you. The difference here in this election is that you have one party that have come into this general election prepared. Even though they weren't the party that actually fought for the election, and in such a short period of time, they have outlined policy which has been costed, which has been backed up by top economists across the world, ranging from Thomas Piketty to Nobel Prize winning economists like Joseph Stiglitz. These policies have been backed up by academia, they're well costed, and you can instantly see what they're aiming to do and what they're proposing to do in a time frame that's outlined. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, it's also been backed up by the
Okay, so because politicians are so well trained these days, what you see is journalists just looking for gotcha questions. If you're the Shadow Home Secretary, admittedly she has fumbled quite a lot with her numbers, but as a Shadow Home Secretary there'll be a lot of numbers that are going around in your head. The point here is what Labour have outlined in their manifesto is what they're actually going to do if they get into government. Another point, so also I want to kind of question throughout my speech kind of the idea about Theresa May being a strong and stable leader. A strong leader, I would say, is a leader who can survive what Jeremy Corbyn survived. He has come from a minus 24% coal deficit to the latest by survey being only minus 1%. Instead, we have Queen U-turn, who at the first sign of anyone from her core support challenging one of her flagship policy, pretty much her only policy outlined in the manifesto, she U-turned straight away. In fact, someone commented, I think she might be the first leader to actually U-turn on a manifesto pledge before the general election has even been won. Now, the attacks over the last couple of weeks have shocked the whole country. And it is well known that everyone normally turns to the Conservative Party when they're looking for a party which is like well known for law and order. But I have a question. I don't know if you guys remember who was Home Secretary from 2010 to 2016. But that unidentified Home Secretary actually reduced the number of armed officers on our streets by just under 1,000. The number of soldiers deployed on our streets after the Manchester attack was just by chance just under 1,000. And yes, I will actually criticise the tragedies that have befallen our country over the last 2 weeks. Because you cannot let rhetoric diminish and abdicate the responsibility of government to keep our country safe. And that has been the only thing that Theresa May has done so far. She's tried to shut down the debate by abdicating all responsibility for her decision of making us less safe.
On that point,
Go ahead.
those attacks.
On your face, Mr. Dobbin.
Those attacks were responded to within a call by around 8 minutes by the police force. I think it's unfair to blame it on numbers, which was clearly an unexpected attack that could easily slip through the cracks anywhere. And the police service should instead be commended for its response.
At the time of the attack, the soldiers were deployed afterwards to try and keep us safe, which is what the armed response have been trained their whole careers to do, rather than soldiers who have to react in a naturally militaristic way. So it wasn't to do with the reaction of the commendable reaction of our emergency services immediately after the attacks. It's what we would respond towards afterwards. And I'm going to move on to the economy, actually, very briefly. So we are now the slowest growing country in the whole of the G7. Having this time last year been the fastest growing in the whole of the G7. This has been through the decisions of the Conservative Party to go and push towards a hard Brexit, undermining the confidence in our economy, undermining consumer sentiment, undermining the investment in the manufacturing sectors. This has all been driven by infighting in the Conservative Party, if it was to do with calling the Brexit referendum in the first place, or whether it's the reason why she's calling for an election now. It's got nothing to do with the mandate to do with the EU, for negotiating with the EU. No other country in the EU or any of their leadership could give a toss about how many seats the Conservative Party have. This is to reassure herself, and then Theresa May can start pushing through a bunch of repulsive policies, anywhere ranging from specifically, the reason why they haven't costed their manifesto is because they're planning on plummeting corporation tax. So they don't want to outline specifically in their manifesto that they're going to bring down corporation tax to around 12%. And when you create a bargain bucket system, then what happens is you have lower working standards and you have poorer working people across the country. What I'd ask you to do on Thursday, when you're voting, is actually have a look at this government's record. This year, it's expected that 12% of maths and science teachers will leave the profession, in the highest recorded exodus since records began. We can look towards the highest ever patient satisfaction results in the NHS, which were in 2010, just as Gordon Brown was leaving, to now the lowest levels of patient satisfaction in only 7 years since records began once again. The junior doctor debacle. Over 1 million people using food banks in the last year, 436,000 of which are children. Cuts across policing. That means that you barely see a bobby on the street, and you've seen a rise in knife crime, as well as making us feel less safe in our home cities. A diplomatic pact that has seen us alienated by our European friends and instead aligning with the Trump administration that leak confidential and classified information to the news, and miss every migration target by hundreds of thousands under the stewardship of this Home Secretary. I ask you, how much of your perception of the Labour Party is down to what you've seen, and how much has been down to what you've told? And that's the decision that you should make before you enter into those polling booths on Thursday. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now welcome the second speaker for the Liberal Democrats, Mr. Jason Bunting. Having yourself or?
Yes.
Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Yes, good evening, Chairperson, colleagues, esteemed opposition. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight and make the case for that most ever popular political parties in the letter effect, the Liberal Democrats. I'm here tonight for a very simple reason and to articulate a very simple ideology. And it might sound a bit cliched, but I'm going to go for it because our ideology is that it doesn't have to be this way. So as a Liberal, it's very easy to look back on the last 2 years and just despair. Despair at the UK voting narrowly to take itself out of Europe and shirk our economic opportunities and our political responsibilities to the world. Despair at an extreme Tory party determined to make the most damaging exit it could possibly be. And despair at a shambolic Labour Party which is utterly unable to hold the government to account on any major issue. The Lib Dems are offering you the real choice in this election, and that's to reject the hard left of the 1970s and then also to reject the far right of Thatcher 2.0, where basically the most vulnerable people in our society are left to face. This can't be acceptable in our society. So the Lib Dems fundamentally are offering you an open, tolerant and united country, and we're proud to do so and proud to stand on our manifesto. So, as I think it was Peter said, Theresa May wants to make this the Brexit election. So let's talk about Brexit. So last June, the British people voted for a departure, but we did not vote for a destination. It's been talked a lot tonight about how we somehow want to overthrow the will of the people, which is simply not true. If the Tory party thinks that Brexit is so popular and that the British people have such an enthusiasm for it, why are they afraid of a second vote? Surely they should be proud to stand on it again. And we're Democrats, we want to basically see another vote on the nature of the deal, because this could be an awful deal. This is a government that's proposed the dementia tax, the bedroom tax. This is a government that's basically is talking about means testing, winter fuel payments, and taking away your free school lunches.
On that point, why should a millionaire get winter fuel payments?
We're not talking about millionaires, we're talking about protecting the most vulnerable people in our society, which is the elderly. And I just hate this argument that we don't have money to pay for things like free school lunches and winter fuel, because whenever there's illegal war to pay for, or whenever there's corporation tax to cut, we always find the money. Why can't we find the money to protect our elderly and protect our young people? So last June we voted on our known terms to leave the EU, but May's hard Brexit was never on the ballot. We never voted for it. So at the heart of our proposal to British people is this offer to just have another vote, defend it again if you're so enthusiastic about Brexit. And if it started with democracy, it shouldn't end in a stitch-up. Ultimately, all this talk about sovereignty is basically saying, like, oh, we've regained our sovereignty by deciding to leave the EU. So let's be sovereign again. Let the people decide, and don't let Brexit be decided by Tories and the Brussels bureaucrats, which one of us clearly hates, yeah.
It's the Brussels bureaucrats that made France vote again, made Ireland vote again, made Denmark vote again. This is the thing that they do. They get people to vote again so that their decision, what they want, is actually going to pass.
No, but it's not the same thing, because on a lot of those referenda, they actually adapted the deal. Like take Ireland. I can't really remember what it was, but Ireland had a very specific concern to that. I think it was like the Lisbon Treaty, and they changed the Lisbon Treaty to make an exception for Ireland. So what we're talking about is just giving the people another say, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I just think that because nobody expected Brexit, they're so scared that we're not going to get it again. But I think we should respect sovereignty. Another thing that the Tory party and the Labour party failed to do is unilaterally guarantee the rights of EU nationals to live and work in Britain. And basically what we're arguing is that we don't have to accept whatever deal we get, because the Labour party is saying we're going to get a deal no matter what, which basically gives Brussels a blank cheque to give us anything, and the Tory party is saying that, like, well, you know the type of deal the Tory party is going to pursue, it's going to be damaging for working people, because despite what they say, they're not the party of the workers. So yeah, we don't have to accept whatever deal we get, and I would like to say, especially in a room full of young people, 3/4 of young people voted to remain. So the Lib Dems believe in trusting young people and giving young people to vote to right to remain to want more. So Brexit is in the end a catastrophic mistake for our country and our society, and the Lib Dems will never stop trying to avoid it. So the other major plank of the Lib Dem manifesto, I think, is the utter failure of Labour to provide either a credible opposition or a champion for the bench. I think, we can look at this table and we can say, okay, there's basically 3 left-wing parties fighting against the Tories, but the difference between the Liberal Democrats and Labour and the Greens is we're actually competent, whereas the Labour government, I'm sorry, like, you have a Marxist Chancellor and you have a Home Secretary who can't add up. And and there was this whole argument, or like she's done so many interviews.
Sir.
Not right now. Oh, sorry.
The Lib Dems in the government where they could oppose the Tory cuts as much as they like. They didn't do anything.
We did a lot. in 2015 we held like 8% of MPs. We were the minor, what's like a partner in coalition. So it's not that we didn't get anything done, it's the fact that the Tory party and Labour have stolen our policies. For example, we keep hearing about David Cameron introduced equal marriage and what a great social reformer he is. That was the Liberal Democrat policy, and that's what the Liberal Democrats put through. It's true, but I don't like that. So, I know many of you are probably really impressed with Jeremy's campaigning right now. I can completely understand why. He has turned this around, and fair play to him. But that's because that's all Jeremy knows how to do, is run a protest or run a campaign. He can't actually govern.
Point of information. You mentioned briefly about the fact that previously David Cameron has stolen your policy on same-sex marriage. If that's the case, then why, and Liv Linter's so in favour of same-sex marriage, why does Tim Farron struggle to actually articulate it?
Which is very positive for LGBT rights. I think that, yes, Tim Farron does have private, Christian views, but he's not running to be the Pope. He's running to be... I mean, especially in that party that so values its secularism and keeping those views separate, it's not going to let him infringe on the rights of LGBT citizens or anyone else. Finally, because I know I'm on the last minute. We are an honest party. We said that we'd raise 1p on everyone's income tax to pay for the NHS, create a world-class health service once more, and we're pumping billions into education and we're opposing a selective education system. And we're going to invest 100 billion into the economy to rebuild the nation. And the Liberal Democrats is, in conclusion, the only party that can provide an actual alternative, a realistic alternative to Theresa May's hard Brexit. And while Jeremy Corbyn is walking beside me out of Europe, we will be standing up to her, and while she's refusing, we will be welcoming them. So I urge you to vote for the Liberal Democrats in Berlin.
I'd like to point out that as far as Mr. Beck and I can say, that last kind of information was given by God himself. We have no evidence to the contrary, just a voice from nowhere. So, very, very bizarre. Nice to have you here. I welcome our second speaker for the Green Party and the closing speaker for the debate, Mr. Richie Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thanks to everyone for coming here today to witness this debate. First of all, a few rebuttals. Hugh said that our policies were too high risk. Well, with water levels rising, I think it's too high risk not to adopt our policies. In terms of the winter fuel allowance, which made by yourself, sorry, I don't know your name, but it's not about why should millionaires get winter fuel allowance. It's what this Tory government, it's an excuse to skip on vital social care. That's what the winter fuel allowance changes is about. So, in preparation for this debate, I started off by thinking that I would try to persuade you to vote for the Green Party by saying that we are essentially Corbyn. We're Corbyn before it was cool to be Corbyn. And that seems like it literally happened like last week. The truth is, putting an X next to the Green Party on Thursday is a better decision than voting for Labour, and the best decision you can make. Corbyn claims to be an internationalist, a cosmopolitan, and a pro-European. He's none of these things. He was almost completely absent from the most important vote in the history of the United Kingdom, the European Union referendum in June last year. He should not be rewarded for this. He is a Lexiteer. The Greens were not. They were on the front line of the referendum debate, and they understand that the biggest challenges that face the UK today, whether it be climate change, terrorism or tax evasion, can only be combated on an international scale and by remaining in the European Union. They understand that isolationism is suicide. We are the only true internationalist party.
On the point?
Yeah, sure.
Corbyn has never claimed an isolationist policy. It says, it outlines very clearly in the manifesto that we're not running out of the European Union, we're trying to do what's best for the country, and if in an unlikely event that is leaving the EU, then that's what we'll have to do. We'll have to create the best trade deal possible, and that might mean leaving the EU. I certainly hope, as I believe along the rest of the Labour Party, that it isn't, but I think these claims are over-exaggerated and not validated in the manifesto.
I don't think they are. I mean, I think he said himself that the manifesto was a mutual effort by all members of the party. I think personally his views are he wants out of Europe, and I think this is reinforced by the fact that he was completely absent during the referendum. You can't deny that. And he has done nothing to protect Europeans, the rights of Europeans currently living in the UK. He's done nothing to try and stop Brexit. So yeah, I think those claims and those suspicions last year are found to be true.
On that point?
Sorry, I have to move on. Yeah, so we're the only true internationalist party. We have an important presence and run candidates in the UK, in the north of Ireland, the south of Ireland, Europe, the US, all over. We've shown time and time again that you don't need the keys to number 10 to open the doors to change. Corbyn instructed his MPs to vote against every bill that would protect the rights of EU citizens, as I've said, already living in the UK and would attempt to stop Brexit. The fact is that a vote for Labour is a vote for Brexit. The Greens are not ashamed to stand up for the 48% of people who voted to remain, and the majority who voted to remain in those parts of the UK that are hanging on to the empire by its fingertips. For those reasons, there can and should be a second ratification referendum, and this is one of our policies. It will give the people the choice to stay in the EU or support the government's decision to leave. Unlike Corbyn, we are not ashamed to say this. We are the alternative to a Tory hard Brexit that you, the 48%, want, Labour are not. Also, a rebuttal to John from earlier as well. You mentioned disrespecting the will of the British people by asking for a second referendum. The British establishment have been disrespecting the will of the Irish people for centuries. The Greens will not do that. A ratification referendum on the EU respects that fact that the North of Ireland voted for Remain. And I would also add that the next time you make it clear, the next time during if there is a second referendum, make it clear that you cannot leave Europe without a Brexit vote in Northern Ireland and Scotland. I think that's the only way of doing it, and I think that would be something you could do again. Also, I would lower the voting age to make sure that 16-year-olds can vote, and that is again one of the Green Party's policies. As young people will be affected most by Brexit. So, furthermore, in light of Donald Trump pulling the US out of the Paris Climate Agreement, those who really care about the environment need to make a statement. We need a louder Green voice worldwide. Vote for a party that is against fracking, spends money in hospitals and schools, and not on nuclear bombs. Vote for a party who is friends with those who care about the planet, not the climate deniers and dictators who will destroy our world. In the words of our leader, Caroline Lucas, fearless Green MPs are in opposition to the Tories. They are independent MPs holding Labour's feet to the fire. They are pioneering MPs making our economy fit for tomorrow. So with that, I plead with you to vote for the Green Party on Thursday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallagher. We will now move to questions from the floor. Now, I'm not going to lie, the setup for this debate is slightly odd. Normally we would just have two sides, but we have four sides. Okay.
There's really two sides.
Silence you! So yes, I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to maintain a consistent style of how we ask select questions, but we'll see how this goes. So first of all, I'd like to ask if anybody has a general question that would apply to all the parties. Just say, well, okay, go ahead, sir.
Something I've got for I want to direct this to all parties, but particularly to the Lib Dems and the Greens. Can I just remind you that unless your ballot paper was different, it said on the 23rd of June, should the United Kingdom, not should the four individual parts of the United Kingdom, should the United Kingdom leave. The United Kingdom voted to leave. I was sitting awake at 20 to 5 in the morning when it was declared, and I'm not ashamed of that. I was sitting when the announcement was declared. It is very clear that the United Kingdom voted to leave, and the United Kingdom will leave as a United Kingdom.
Is the United Kingdom united, however? I mean, I mean, there is a complete ignorance of the fact that a certain percentage of people vehemently do not want to be part of the United Kingdom. There is no respect for that whatsoever. We thought there was on the Good Friday Agreement. We thought there was the foundation of the Northern Irish state. We thought there was after the first Home Rule crisis, the second Home Rule decision, the third Home Rule decision. There is no acceptance of that fact. There's none in Scotland. There's none. So for all these things taken into consideration, the next vote, if there is one, has got to include a caveat that if Northern Ireland and Scotland disagree with the English decision, then it can't happen.
I must be strict. We are short on time, I'm afraid. Mr. Buckley, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So I think at the end of the day, it's about respect, isn't it? It's about respecting the fact that yes, while the whole country voted to leave, the Northern Ireland and Scotland voted to remain. And the EU has shown itself to be actually quite a flexible institution. And it can make compromises, and it has if you look at the cases of countries that are necessarily inside the EU but not subscribed to like Schengen and Euro and things like that. So it's not hard to do. I think definitely special designated status could be a possibility for the Northern Ireland and for Scotland. And it's about respecting democracy in those two regions. And if we want to be truly united, then we need respect for each party or each part in of the United Kingdom. So I don't see anything wrong with that.
Any response from the Liberal? We don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that you haven't heard from the previous two parties because as a party I think it's enormously important to do what's best for everyone, and that would, I agree, mean having a caveat for the Northern Ireland for Scotland because, as I said earlier, each constituency in Scotland did vote to remain, and if leaving as a completely United Kingdom would hurt the country as a whole, I don't think it should be done, so I'm just concurring.
2015, there was an act signed allowing for a referendum to exit the European Union. A referendum for the United Kingdom to exit the European Union. Where was the opposition from the Lib Dems, the Greens or Labour then? It was not there. In 2015. So instead, the Ramoners sat in their high horse, their pristine high horse, ivory towers, assured of their victory. It was only once that they did not achieve this victory that everyone who was against leaving the European Union decided to stand up. It was in the Act that it was a vote for the United Kingdom to leave. It was shown in the law in the Miller case at the start of this year. It was a United Kingdom vote to leave. This has always been the case. There never has been a case for motions of consent from Scotland or Northern Ireland. There never was. And if there was, the parties of those nations and the nations of England should have stood up then and shown opposition to it. Instead, because they didn't think they were going to lose the referendum, they didn't, and that is why they were.
I'll now take a question directed specifically for, let's say, Labour first. Anyone in particular? Come on, no one's got a question for Labour. Go ahead.
I'll address your concern. You seem to be the very visible Labour representative here. My issue is, as young people, we're sort of concerned about planning ahead for the future, while the promises of free university education is obviously very appealing to a lot of us. My problem is the amount of borrowing required for that. It's true, Labour has always been weak in the economy. The biggest problem we have now is where the next potential 5 years of funding that come from, and that's a question I'd like to direct to you. Sorry, Michael Jordan.
What? Is it just very short?
I'm happy to ask you to go and go a lot more focused research on the economy.
So I'm just going to pick you up first on Labour a week on the economy. Sure, if you read the Daily Mail editorial line that works, but you can actually look at the numbers. So the financial crisis isn't Gordon Brown's fault. It's a global financial crisis, and he was actually widely commended amongst everyone apart from our very right-wing newspapers for being the person who pretty much led the decisions out of the financial crisis for the whole of the globe. So I don't accept in any way that Labour are weak on the economy. But to address specifically your connection about two issues is, It depends on what you want your economy to do. So if you want an economy that is going to lead the way in terms of innovation and future industries, right now our economy is 80% based on services, the majority of which are going to be susceptible to bringing in automation, robotics, and AI. What are all our people going to do if all of the people who are working in service jobs at Tesco and whatnot are all gone? What are they going to do? If we haven't created new industries, if we haven't created where the jobs are going to be and led the world, considering that we have already one of the best tertiary education sectors in the world, why not use how intelligent our population are and continue to push them into innovating and researching and pushing forward, not just for this country, but pushing forward technological innovation across the world, like we already are doing in pharmaceuticals, like we are doing in a range of high-tech industries. That is where we need to be in 20, 30, 40 years' time, rather than having just 2% of the population making all the money and everyone else's real wages being the second lowest in the whole of the Eurozone since 2010 to grow. Only Greece have had lower real wage growth.
I would just come back on that very quickly.
Sure, thanks.
No, I would say, but the main question I've got was based on funding and borrowing levels. I completely with you on what we should, free universal education 100%, but the point I was going on was where the borrowings have come from.
Keep it short.
Okay. It's costed. So we've got corporation tax. You've got moving corporation tax to 26%, which is, by the way, the US is at 40%. We are currently less than half, going for half of what the US holds corporation tax. That is one of the ways. Also, moving around things like inheritance tax, making it so then basically capital brought in from where it's currently languishing, sat in reserves, unproductive, and back into the tax purses. And it's all costed, it's been shown to you, so you can have a look through the manifesto and see what that means for you.
I will allow the other side to respond, but keep it brief.
Yeah, I'll be Donald Trump, you said 40% corporation tax, he wants to lower it to 15%. The general trend throughout the world is to lower corporation tax. We're going to be going the opposite way. The tuition fees rise. If you're an online student, it's not going to affect you. It's a default issue. Labour have followed conservative spending in the past, in 1997 onwards, when they achieved a surplus. But before the financial crisis, they ran a 40 billion deficit. I'm not sure the exact figure, but they ran a pretty high deficit at the time. In a growing economy, it was just a stupid idea for them in normal times. And student loans are never high. I don't think it's a skills issue.
Greens, Dems, go ahead.
Yeah, the Liberal Democrats aren't going to be the ones to make any more false promises on nutrition fees. I would warn the Labour Party against making promises that you necessarily can't deliver, because we pay a very high price for that. In terms of representing the interests of young people, though, in opposing Brexit, we are supporting the opinion of 3/4 of people who are young people who vote to remain. We've also got policies like votes for 16 and 17-year-olds, reversing the housing benefit cuts for young people, and I think we only, I'm not 100% on this, but I think we only get 3 months travel in England, so there's that as well. So I think if you're looking at all the parties, it's definitely going to be Democrats that are going to stand up for young people.
No, sorry, I didn't let you do it.
So the Greens support this policy, what policy that's advocated, getting rid of nutrition fees. And I think Mose is exactly right. It depends what you want for your economy and what you think the government's priorities should be. We believe that education should be free. We believe that you shouldn't have a £40,000 debt at university, because that's how we're going to create the skills, and that's how we're going to produce prosperous economy. Not leaving university to the few. I'm not going to say that.
I just want to say
No,
it's not about.
If it's 5 words, then go ahead. If any more, I will shout it.
We did a debate this semester. On marginalisation, you should check it out for education. That's it.
Oh, well, if it's looking at society, of course. Something we can do. So I want to take questions from the Conservatives. Is there anybody other? Do you have a general point for them all? Mr. Beck, if you do, then I'm going to call somebody else. If you have a general point,
addresses everyone.
no, I'm going to take someone else then. No, sit for them.
I'm normal. So Theresa May has pledged for 10,000 more mental health nurses. However, in the Conservative government, we've seen 1 in 10 nursing posts vacant and no pay rise for NHS staff in the last, I think it's 8 years. My mum hasn't had a pay rise. So, what do the Conservatives plan? Oh, and a cut to nurses' bursaries at universities in England, Wales, not in Northern Ireland currently. How do you plan to get these 10,000 mental health nurses to come and work in the NHS?
Tuition fees.
I don't think this is setting yet. We're trying to take it. Who's taking it?
No, but you take Aaron away from
We're going.
I'm going to try and defend the 1% pay rises for both sector workers, but I think Theresa May is going down a different path. I think I'm going to be honest, that she's going a different path. I think she's trying to get away from the Thatcherite kind of stance and live in, which is her point trying to get, what? She's trying to step away from that, so I think you might see a different trend from Conservatives on public sector issues, but I'm not entirely sure. Sorry.
And I will allow the Lib Dems to go first if you want. Mr. Anthony?
Yeah, just a brief point. I mean, we've seen in the public sector, certainly, we've mentioned in that there are places being declined or being reduced by Conservatives and also nurses. I'd just like to mention about, Brexit. Because a quarter of our doctors and nurses in the NHS are from outside the UK, so if this hard Brexit is presumed, then the drawbridges are pulled up in terms of Brexit, that will unfortunately affect it. It's also not a reason why we need either a good deal or to be able to remain as EU to protect the NHS. It just would depend on workers from elsewhere outside of the UK.
David?
We completely agree with you and think that the role of nurses and doctors, particularly in the mental health sector, is invaluable, and we absolutely seek to reverse what's happening and make sure that it doesn't happen in Northern Ireland. There's now an 18-month wait time for children's mental health, and I've got the manifesto up here again. So an 18-month wait time for children and young people who are presenting symptoms of mental health problems as early as 14, yet only 8% of mental health claims go to services for children and young people. So I think we need to find a balance. We need to make sure that the nurses and doctors are being treated fairly and that they are being given the pay that they deserve, because it's not a job that I could do at all. And I think for myself and for the party generally, that is one of our top priorities, is healthcare and mental health care, especially for children and young people, LGBT people, anyone that needs it, and making sure they don't have to wait 18 months, that they're getting the best care that they can by nurses who are well paid and looked after, because if you well pay your nurses, everybody benefits from it. There's no possible downside to it. So thank you.
Greens?
This all goes back to my previous point. It's all about what you want to do with the economy and where your priorities lie. And the Green Party believes that the priority should be healthcare. It should be giving a good wage that increases as the economy does. And the Conservatives have just missed this. I believe that a healthy society is also a more prosperous society, and I think it's a really good point. And something that the Conservatives government really needs to get.
Right now I have a suggestion for the House. We can either have, again, we're quite short of time, the building, this room is booked until 9. I'm sure the porter will give us, 5 minutes to be away. And the House bar, Strong Ellis, where I hope you'll all join us. It is booked for 9. So, do we want to take specific question, or any specific question for the Greens, and a specific question for the Liberal Democrats, switching around? Or instead, do we want to have a flagrant disregard for the rules? And instead, we'll take Mr. Beck's general point and we'll allow some back and forth in sort of an actual debate. Quick picture of hands. Specific points, who wants those? Or flagrant disregard for the rules, general point, back and forth. Flagrant disregard for the rules, yes! So, Mr. Beck, if you'd like to make your general question.
I'm just going to do a colour order here because some of what I heard made me quite angry actually, and it's an issue that hasn't really been addressed, I don't think, or properly addressed as much as expected it to be, and that's on policing and national security. Mr. Dublin and the Conservatives sort of batted away the point by applauding the bravery of the officers. No one has any doubt about how brave the officers were, especially the officer at the Scum Hospital, who had to take on the three attackers with only his weapon. But I think the real issue there is why he had to do that and why he had to show that bravery and why this attack happened in the first place. No one is questioning the reactive policing that we have. Armed police were on the scene in this situation was dealt with in London in 8 minutes. Nobody's questioning that. The issue is that for the past, Conservatives been in government 7 years, the cuts that have been made to police forces mean, yes, we still have the reactive policing, we don't do proactive policing, community policing, the things that actually stop these attacks from happening in the first place have completely been decimated, and they're still asking for more cuts. And I would also criticise the Lib Dems at this point, because there wasn't enough opposition to this whenever they were in government, and even from Labour. This has hardly been mentioned through the last 7 years, or at least I haven't heard it mentioned by them either, and this hasn't been an issue, and this is critical. And again, the Conservatives are trying to cut this even more. In Northern Ireland, George Hamilton, the Chief Constable, is saying they're going to have to cut 20 million more from their budget. That's the same as all that is spent on neighbourhood policing in this country in a year, so they're going to have to potentially cut all of that. So how can that record be defended? The record from any of the parties who have failed to address this issue. Sorry, 20 minutes.
I'd like to point out that was not so much a major point, it's just a point that attacked everyone. But I mean, that points too. So, does anybody have a burning desire to speak first? Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We wouldn't seek to defend any part of the Conservatives' record. Again, yes, we were in coalition with them. I want to stress that we were the minor party in coalition, and we couldn't stop everything that the Tories did. I hope if you didn't give us a chance because of the record in coalition, the Lib Dems pledged to put an extra 300 million into policing in the next 5 years. And I think what we've definitely seen is that when you cut police numbers and when you decimate the police in the way that you have, and basically Theresa May as Home Secretary wished to open more on the police forces, then that costs lives, and we've seen that in the past few months. And yeah, it's an absolute disgrace, and the Lib Dems wouldn't be continuing that record if we got them.
You'd like to? No?
I'd just also like to add to it. So we need to be clear, this was all under Theresa May's remit as Home Secretary. These are specifically the results of her decisions. And it wasn't as if she hadn't been warned. She'd been warned by the head of MI5. She'd been warned pretty much every single year at the Police Federation. In fact, there was one specifically in 2015 where the Police Officer of the Year or something of the equivalent came up in the Police Federation conference and said, with these cuts that you're bringing in, there is going to be a major incident, and we are going to have it took back to vigilante policing, where we are going to have to bring soldiers onto the streets, and police officers will be too stretched to actually deal with these situations. And then, exactly 2 years later, word for word, this has occurred. And at the time, what did Theresa May say? She said that the Police Federation was scaremongering. Well, we've seen specifically that they weren't scaremongering, and those kind of decisions are now going to be brought in as a Prime Minister rather than just a Home Secretary.
Speaking suspicion that no matter what the representatives of the Conservatives say, everybody else will take issue with it, so I'll like to read the go next.
Yeah, now with Mo, you'll probably expect Mo to criticise Theresa May on that. Corbyn has also said something very similar, and again, you would expect Corbyn to say something like that. But interestingly today, someone else came out and said almost word for word what Mo and Corbyn said. And Steve Hilton, the former strategist under David Cameron, said that Theresa May should go as well because of her what he calls terror failures. So yeah, I mean the case is mounting for the fact that May has to take responsibility for this. Hilton actually said that she should go because of it.
Conservatives, here, the floor is yours.
I'll go.
Come on. We all know that you can defend literally anything, so
Alright, well, anti-terror police funding was protected, if I believe correctly. Well, I don't believe it was then. I haven't checked that one out. But This is going to sound quite controversial, so I'm going to have to ask that this is taken off from there for you. But I believe that
Mr. Murphy, would you like to say something about it?
Yeah, I'd just like to say briefly that this is a two-pronged approach. First prong will be attacking you guys for being terrible. I think there is a very strong argument to be said that the cut in police numbers has been disastrous. I mean, the support officers that arrived on the scene from Kensington were not support officers. They were they were officers who had been pulled off their beat in Kensington, having done a 12-hour shift, only to do another 4 hours, another 8 hours in some cases. So what you're talking about wasn't support officers. You were asking the same number of officers to do a 20-hour shift. The fact is that the Police Federation have said that officers on the beat are threadbare countrywide, not just in the metropolis. So that is the first problem. But I think the other problem that all sides have, the trap that they've all fallen into is thinking that what we have to do is just be like increasing police numbers is the proactive thing to do. So you have to be seen to be doing something. And so no one's really willing to address the fact that for the 3,000 suspects that are on record in MI5, for every person that MI5 has on that list, it requires about 30 people to watch every one individual. And that is not a tenable government policy for anyone to advocate to increase numbers of watching them. Increasing the bodies on the beat is only going to do so much. Everyone is failing to address the fact that we need to ask far more probing questions of ourselves as a society, and that this is more an ideological war, not a physical war. We have to address the fact that every last person who has committed a terrorist attack on British soil has been from a lower working class background, from metropolitan areas. They have been, in some cases, almost ghettoised in nature, and so what we need to do is think about a strategy for far better integration and a society that addresses the multiplicity of backgrounds within society rather than this ghettoising and ignoring the cracks.
I would like to say, first of all, it's worth pointing out that Mr. Murphy was the president just before me, and he's been saving that for a year. Also, shame on you, Mr. Beck, for asking what was meant to be an initial question, but has been exposed as clearly having anti-conservative bias. I feel awful at the situation that these fellas in. So I would like to ask, we have time for at most 2 more points, and if anybody would like to make one, please try and adjust it more towards the second bit of what Mr. Murphy said, and not more Tory bashing.
Address it to the good guys.
Unless at the very end, someone would like to make one mega super short Tory bash. I will be saying, I'll take you.
Hi, Erin here. I would just like to ask, because none of the groups really mentioned anything about it, what their specific policies on immigration would be.
We totally do not have time. Ordinarily, the debate would go on about maybe another half hour or more, but the problem is it's this room. We don't have till 9 and whatnot, so I'm sorry, but we'll have to completely ignore that.
My question is, it's sort of quite rare because it's a bash me and everyone else, although the Tories.
We don't have time, that's the question, man.
Sorry, it's to do with the prevent strategy. The Green Party have said they want to scrap it, and they've also said they want to open the door to anyone coming from the Middle East or North Africa, the same with the Dems. Sure, that's a very dangerous policy in light of these attacks. People, we need to make sure people who come to this country, we know who they are, and we know why they want to come here. And it's the same with Labour with their mayor, who's shared platforms with hate preachers, Islamic hate preachers. Soon if he's not really capable of dealing with radical Islam either.
Can we get your implements?
Oh yes, here.
Okay, but sure. This is the last thing we'll be saying, so make it good.
Do you remember when Zach Goldsmith said the same in the London Mayor? You'll always find situations where you've shared a panel and one of these open discussions with someone who is like that or whatever. But the problem that we have is, I actually don't disagree with the prevent strategy, but this is an issue where Okay, opening doors coming in from the Middle East, coming in from North Africa. Look at where all the terrorist attacks come from. Are they refugees? Are they migrants? Or are they all homeborn? Pretty much.
I know we can't rid of it, but we have.
Did I answer the same question?
Did you say you understand?
Oh, no, it's just, he was the son of refugees, so yes, he was sort of.
No, it's not. Okay, in second generation, if you're born and bred here, then you can't say, oh, it's because you're the son of refugees. Because at that point, you're just pretty much classifying, I don't know, about 15 to 20% of the population. And what we're supposed to do, deport them all back to the colonial countries at the border. It doesn't make any sense. Okay, the refugees across Germany, France, all of the terrorists were almost comprehensively born in that country. So I don't accept that part of the policy.
Conservatives, anything?
Well, we've got the entire thing there.
So I suppose
Please, come on, things good and sweet. Yeah, sorry.
On the Conservative Manifesto, which I should probably give a read at some point, the Conservative Party pledges to reduce net migration to tens of thousands, double the immigration skills charge in companies employing migrant workers, increase minimum earnings thresholds for family visa sponsorship, and toughen requirements for student visas and rules allowing them to stay and work. Sounds nasty.
Little Democrats.
When it comes to immigration, we are one of the few parties that are prepared to defend free movement, and just on the point about lowering immigration to the tens of thousands, that's what Theresa May's Home Secretary promised for 6 years. It's gone up actually, not just from the EU. In fact, last year there was more immigration from outside of the EU, which she actually did have the power to control even without Brexit. So, when it comes to immigration, we're prepared to defend from within the EU firstly because obviously it brings jobs to the NHS. 25%, for example, of people working in the NHS are from outside the UK, but also because it works in two ways. There's 3 million EU citizens in the UK. There's also 2 million UK citizens living elsewhere in the EU. And with the current strategy that was, when Article 50 was triggered by the Conservatives and Labour supporting them, they refused to give a guaranteed either side, which the House of Lords had proposed, and they voted it down. So we're prepared to stand up for them, and we think that we need a positive immigration system. When it comes to refugees, yes, for example, we bring back the Dawes Amendment, which was disgracefully removed, which would have protected, which would have protected 3 million refugee children who are in Europe all by themselves. And we think we need to play our part as a major country, the fifth largest economy in the world. So.
Thank you, Stan. Closing work. Greens.
Okay. So to retort a bit from my speech, we need an immigration system that's fair and just, and that means not extenuating and tightening up stereotypes. It means believing in freedom of movement, and that doesn't mean that the security measures won't be put in place to keep our country safe, because they will. But it means we are strongly passionate and strongly believe that free movement isn't the problem, as Mo clearly said. So,
thank you very much, Mr. Dunn. Unfortunately, it does have to conclude the debate part of the meeting this evening. But before we go to the vote, I would like to point out that we will be adjourning to the House Bar of journalists. Please follow the meeting. The debate can continue there, I assure you. Corner these people and get them to answer your questions, particularly the Conservatives who got up late. But yes, to recap, House Bar. If anybody is interested in acquiring a membership to this fine society, you can speak to myself or Mr. Beck. We will take care of that. Membership fees are low, going quickly. But I refuse to specify exactly how much, because once I have you cornered, you're not skipping about that. So, I think we shall now move on to the vote, unless Rob is there anything I missed. Nope. Okay, move on to the vote. So, this is a vote on speaker ability. So please do not vote along your own personal bias and belief. It's who you think spoke best tonight, which side gave their speech the best and answered questions the best. So, to begin with, all those who believe that the Conservatives spoke best tonight, please raise your hand high and say strong and still. We Okay, we have two. All those. Make your mind up, Mr. Mackle. We have a third. A shy Tory. Okay, all those who believe that the Labour Party spoke best tonight, please raise your hand and say, many not few. Is that hand up? Well, who do you think spoke best? Conservatives, Labour, or we're not going to hear people yet? We have no time! Moving on! The Liberal Democrats spoke best this evening. Please raise your hand and say, Witness flag! And if you believe that the Green Party never spoke best tonight, please raise your hand and say, just happy to be here. Still up. 4, 5, 6, 7. And if you believe that everybody spoke equally well, equally terrible, or you just like to express no opinion whatsoever, as I want to do, please raise your hand and say loud and proud, meh! Oh, come on! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did you not vote?
Did you vote for that?
7.
Yep.
Oh. Excellent. So, Mr. Secretary, who do we declare to be the winners tonight? Mr. Murphy.
All three of them.
Winners this evening. This may happen several times this week, but we'll see. Our Labour.
Congratulations to all of our speakers and all those in the gallery who gave points tonight. Everybody was very well spoken. Like I said, I invite you all to the House of Bar. Sure.